Kayla Morgan was already running late when the knock came, the knock that would crack open the life she had spent 3 years building with her bare hands. She was in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl for Eli, when she heard it. 3 clean knocks. Not urgent, not aggressive, just certain, like whoever was on the other side of that door already knew she was home. She almost didn't answer. She pulled the door open, and the words she had prepared, "I'm not interested. I'm busy, whatever you're selling," died somewhere in her throat. Lucas Reed was standing on her front step. He was older than she remembered, quieter in the way he held himself. He wasn't dressed to impress. Just a plain jacket, dark jeans, a thin folder tucked under his arm. He looked like a man who had rehearsed something and then decided at the last second to throw out the script. "Kayla," he said. She didn't move. "How do you know where I live?" "I hired someone to find you." He said it plainly, without apology but also without arrogance. "I needed to find you." "You needed to." Her voice came out flat. "After 3 years." "I didn't know," he said. "I need you to hear that before anything else." "I did not know." She gripped the door frame, and then Eli padded into the hallway behind her in his socks, dragging his stuffed elephant by one ear, and looked up at the stranger at the door with wide, serious eyes. Lucas went completely still. Eli tilted his head and said, "Your shoes are muddy." And Lucas Reed, who had built a company worth more than most people would ever count, slowly crouched down on one knee and said, "You're right. I should have cleaned them. I'm sorry about that." Eli thought about it. Then he nodded, satisfied, and wandered back to the living room. Kayla stood in the doorway for a long moment. "You have 10 minutes, she said. "And you're not coming inside." But she hadn't always been this closed off. There was a time when Kayla Morgan was the daughter her family showed off, the one her aunties called the responsible one, the one who sang in the choir and made the honor roll and never gave her parents a single reason to worry. She had grown up in Southwest Atlanta in a house where reputation was guarded like something sacred. Her father ran a small contracting business. Her mother led the women's ministry at their church. They were proud people, proud in the way that left very little room for mistakes. Kayla had followed every rule. Until she was 20. She still remembered standing in her parents' living room, hands pressed flat against her thighs so no one would see them shake. She had practiced the words for days. None of that helped. Her father had looked at her the way you look at something you don't recognize anymore. Not with rage, with something quieter and colder. "You can't bring this shame into our home," he said. "You need to leave." Her mother said nothing, and that silence was louder than any word her father had spoken. Within a week, Kayla was gone. One suitcase. No goodbye dinner. No call from her sisters. She walked out of that house with a child growing inside her and nowhere certain to go, and she made herself one promise. She would never beg anyone to stay. She had met Lucas 2 months before she found out she was pregnant. She had been working a weekend shift at a luxury hotel during a tech summit, one of 3 jobs she juggled at the time. It was past midnight when she found him sitting alone in a quiet corridor off the main lobby, jacket on the floor beside him, his head in his hands. He looked like a man whose life had outrun him. She almost walked past. Instead she said, "You want some water or something?" He laughed, short and surprised. "I want a different life." But water would help. They talked for almost 2 hours. Not about his company or her job. About pressure. About loneliness. About how you can be surrounded by people who need things from you and still feel completely alone. He told her he hadn't slept properly in months. She told him what it felt like to be the one in the family who was never allowed to fall apart. When her shift started again, she told herself it was just a conversation. Those happened sometimes. They didn't have to mean anything. By morning, he was gone. No number. No note. She found out she was pregnant 6 weeks later. She had tried once to reach him. One call to his company's main line. One message left with an assistant who wrote her name down in a tone that made clear nothing would follow. And nothing did. So Kayla did what she had always done. She moved to a smaller city. She worked doubles. She slept in short windows. When Eli arrived, she held him in a hospital room with no one else present, pressed her lips to his curls and whispered, It's you and me now. That's enough. And for 3 years, she made it enough. Now Lucas was on her front step, and she was standing there trying to remember how to breathe normally. How did you find out? She asked. He explained it steadily, a genetic screening program, a lab flag, a private investigator hired quietly, a file with her name on it delivered 2 weeks later. He held out the folder. She didn't take it. And now, she said, now I want to know my son. He said it without flinching. I'm not here with lawyers. I haven't filed anything. I don't want to take him from you. I want to earn a place, if you'll let me try. She stared at him. You don't get to just show up and want things, she said. I know that. His voice didn't waver. I know I don't have the right to ask. But I'm asking anyway. The evening air sat between them. She didn't say yes. But she didn't close the door either. What happens when he keeps coming back? And her family finds out who he is. Stay with us. He came back the next day. Kayla didn't open the door. She watched from the window as Lucas sat down on the front steps, elbows on his knees, and waited. 40 minutes passed. Then he got up, walked to his car, and left. No anger. No note left on the door. He just left. She told herself it meant nothing. But the next evening, when she heard the knock, she opened it after 20 minutes instead of 40. It went on like that. Slow, careful, nothing dramatic. He never arrived with gifts or tried to win Eli over with big gestures. He showed up. He sat. He talked to Kayla if she wanted to talk, and sat in the quiet if she didn't. Once, Eli wandered out with a book he couldn't read yet and handed it to Lucas without any explanation. Lucas opened it and read the whole thing out loud, doing different voices for each animal, while Kayla stood in the kitchen doorway pretending to check her phone. She was not checking her phone. One evening, she finally said, "Why didn't you come sooner?" "Because I didn't know," he said. "I know that sounds like an excuse. It does. It's still the truth." He looked at her steadily. "The moment I knew, I came. I'm not asking you to forgive the 3 years. I'm asking you to let me show up for the ones that come after." She didn't answer, but she let him stay until Eli's bedtime. That felt like something. Then her phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Kayla frowned and almost ignored it. Nobody called this late unless something was wrong. The ringing stopped. A second later, her phone vibrated again. Voicemail. She stared at it for a moment before pressing play. "Kayla, it's Mom." Her chest tightened. She didn't call back right away. She sat there, phone in her hand, staring at the wall like the years hadn't just folded in on themselves. Finally, she tapped the number and put the phone to her ear. "Hello, baby." Her mother's voice came out soft and waterlogged. "We've been thinking about you. We want to see you. We want to meet Eli. Can we come?" Kayla sat down on the edge of her bed. "You've been thinking about me," she said quietly. "Kayla, we made mistakes. You changed your number," Kayla said, her voice steady. "You changed your number so I wouldn't be able to reach you." Silence opened on the other end of the line. "We were wrong," her mother said. "Your father knows it. I know it. We want to make it right." Kayla closed her eyes. She had rehearsed this conversation in her head so many times in those first hard months. What she would say, whether she would cry, whether she would yell. She wasn't doing any of those things now. She felt very still, very clear. "I'll think about it," she said, and hung up. She told Lucas that night. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because he was the only person around her who had no stake in what she decided, nothing to gain from any particular answer. He listened without saying anything until she finished. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know." "What does it feel like when you imagine seeing them?" She was quiet for a moment. "Like swallowing something sharp." He nodded slowly. "Then you don't have to do it. Not now. Maybe not ever. It's your call." She looked at him. "You're not going to tell me that family is important? That I should forgive them?" "No." He leaned forward. "You've been making hard calls by yourself for a long time. I'm not going to be another person who tells you what the right answer is." Something shifted in her chest. Quietly, like a key turning in a lock she had forgotten was there. She had not expected that from him. She had been waiting, without realizing it, for the angle. The advice wrapped in care. The opinion disguised as support. That was how it usually worked. He just sat with her in the question and let her own it. 3 weeks later, she met her parents for lunch. Her choice of place, public, somewhere she could leave. Lucas drove her there and sat in the parking lot without being asked. Her father looked older. Her mother had brought flowers that Kayla did not take. The small talk lasted about 90 seconds before Kayla put both hands flat on the table and said, "I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish." Her father nodded. "You put me out when I needed you the most. Not because I had done something dangerous or cruel. Because you were embarrassed. And I need you to understand. I survived it. Eli is healthy. He is loved. He knows he is wanted. I did that. Not you. Not anyone who came back once things looked different." Her mother's eyes filled. "You don't get to love me only when my life looks impressive," Kayla said. "That's not love. That's convenience. And I will not raise my son around it." The table held very still. "So here's what I'm offering. Not because you've earned it, but because Eli deserves to know where he comes from, and I won't let my pain take that from him. We can try. But it will be on my terms, my boundaries, and the first time either of you makes him feel like a condition instead of a child, we're done." Her father looked down. When he raised his head, his eyes were wet. Her father, who had never once cried in front of her. Not once in her whole life. "I'm sorry, Kayla," he said, and his voice came out rough, like something long lodged in his chest had finally broken free. "I am sorry." She didn't tell him it was okay, but she nodded, and that was the beginning of something, even if she didn't know yet what it would become. She has faced her parents. She has watched Lucas show up, day after day. But what happens the night she finally stops waiting for him to leave and realizes something she never planned for? The final part is next. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening when something in Kayla finally shifted for good. Lucas had attempted to cook pasta. She had told him it was a bad idea. He had waved her off with full confidence and produced something that was, technically, a form of food if you were generous about the definition. "This has char on it," she said, pushing it around her plate. "That's texture. Lucas, you burned pasta. I followed every step. There are crunchy parts. Those are. If you say texture again." He pressed his lips together, clearly fighting something, and she started laughing before she could stop herself. Not a polite laugh. A real one. The kind that came from somewhere low and unguarded. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. Eli was already asleep. The kitchen was small and warm and a little too bright, and Lucas was standing there holding a wooden spoon with the expression of a man who had lost an argument and knew it. She laughed until her eyes watered. When she finally caught her breath, she looked at him across the table. This man who had shown up on her doorstep with nothing but honesty and the willingness to be turned away, who had sat on her steps in the cold, who had read picture books in silly voices and driven her to face her parents and waited in a parking lot without making any of it about himself. She had been waiting this whole time for the moment he would show his real reason for being here. The angle. The ask. That was how people worked in her experience. Everyone eventually wanted something back. But he kept not doing that. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yeah. When you first showed up, I was sure you'd be gone within 2 weeks. She looked at her plate. "I've been waiting for it this whole time. Every time things got hard, or I pushed back, or I made it clear I wasn't going to make this easy, I kept waiting for you to decide it wasn't worth it." He was quiet, watching her. "But you didn't leave," she said. "No. Why?" He thought about it for a moment. Really thought, instead of reaching for something easy to say. "Because Eli is my son," he said. "And because you are someone worth showing up for. Even when you're making it clear you don't need me to." He paused. "Especially then, maybe." She sat with that. "I want you to know something," she said. "I didn't need someone to come in and rescue us. I need you to actually know that. We were okay. I made sure we were okay." "I know," he said. "You made that extremely clear. I'm serious. Kayla." His voice was gentle. "I know. I have never once thought you needed saving. You built something real out of nothing, by yourself with no one behind you. That's not something I could have done. He held her gaze. I'm not here because you need me. I'm here because I want to be. And because I'm hoping eventually you might want me here too. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She had spent 3 years being strong because she had no other option. Strength had been survival. And somewhere along the way she had confused the two, had started to believe that needing anything from anyone was the same as weakness. That letting someone stay meant giving them the power to leave. But Lucas had already stayed through the hardest version of this. The version where she was guarded and sharp and gave him almost nothing to hold on to. He had stayed anyway. I don't really know how to do this, she said. I want to be honest about that. I don't know how to just let someone in without waiting for it to go wrong. That's okay, he said simply. I'm not in a rush. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her fork, took a bite of the terrible pasta, and said, This genuinely might be the worst thing I've ever eaten. I think it's growing on you. It is not growing on me. You're still eating it. She was still eating it. And she was smiling, despite herself, in her small, bright kitchen, while her son slept soundly down the hall. This life she had built from nothing, from one suitcase and one promise and 3 years of refusing to break. She hadn't needed someone to save it. She had needed someone brave enough to walk into it and stay. And for the first time in a very long time, that someone was here. If the story stayed with you, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what was the moment that got you? Because there were a few. Thank you for watching.